Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 2 of Live Cardboard. Stuck with that name. Maybe that's what it's going to be. I have no idea. It's I haven't come up with a better one for now, so we're going to go with that. Anyway, 2 weeks ago, I had a pretty good time. I hope you all did too. So this time, a little bit more of a structured topic, but I totally welcome everybody's feedback or comments, all that sort of stuff. So anyway, without further ado, let's get some of the early stuff out of the way first. We'll have a little news. I don't have much here, but I guess I just want to mention that in case you haven't seen it, a couple weeks ago at the Armchair Dragoons digital convention, I did an interview with Frank Davis, and it was a really interesting interview. He's an interesting guy, but I have to say it wasn't exactly an interview. It didn't feel completely like an interview. Frank, he had a slideshow that he wanted to present as a sort of a background to the things that he wanted to talk about, and so basically it was just my job to pop through the slides and help him along with it. So I don't know. I didn't feel like I did much interviewing, but on the other hand, it was great to talk to Frank or to listen to Frank, I should say. And to hear him talk about, on the one hand, he spent about half the time talking about his days at SPI and Avalon Hill, and then he talked about the games that he's designing now, and he's got some kind of strong opinions about. He's decided he's done with hexes, and he's done with games that give you too much knowledge. So he's got some real ideas about where he wants the future of game design to go. So good luck to Frank. He was a great guy to talk to in the end, but boy, it was like pulling hen's teeth trying to get it together to see how we were going to do that. And then this past weekend, I talked to Grant Dalgleish from Columbia Games, and that was a great conversation as well. Grant's basically taking over the running of the company from his dad, the founder Tom Dalgleish, and although Tom is still definitely very involved in the game design, game development. But running the company is becoming more Grant's thing. Anyway, that interview was more back and forth. And if you're interested in the history of Columbia Games from right back when they were Gamma 2 games, I sort of ran them through, not every game in their catalog, but all the games that meant something to me, or that I felt were like marked a milestone in a change in what they were doing. So it's a good, thorough interview that's all about the history of the company, and a little bit at the end about their new games, of course, because that's what the sort of things that I'm sure he came on that he wanted to talk about. But that was fine with me. They've got a couple of new things that are interesting, and so that was fun to talk about. I should also mention there's a clearance sale going on at Noble Knight. So if your wallet has finally recovered after being depleted over Christmas, well, here's a way to deplete it again. If you go down to the description in the video, you'll see my link, my affiliate link, and if you use that to go to the sale or to their website, I'll get a bit of a kickback. I'll get to buy some more games, and then I'll tell you about them, and then you'll have to go out and buy them if you like them. Anyway, that's I encourage you to check out the sale. Anyway, they have this is the time of year when retailers are feeling the pinch, so they put things, a lot of stuff on sale just to generate some cash flow. And then finally, I just wanted to mention that Bayonets and Tomahawks from GMT is now on Board Game Arena. If you haven't played at Board Game Arena, they're sort of like Rally the Troops in that the implementations completely enforce the rules. There's no it's not like Vassal or Tabletop Simulator or something like that. It's a complete online rules enforcement where you can play live or you can play asynchronously. And they got a few war games up there, or historical games. It's mostly hobby games and Euro games, but they do get a few. And so I'm very happy to see that Bayonets and Tomahawks is up there. And in fact, I've started my first game playing with someone else. And the interface, it's still in beta, and I think there's a few like user interface things that could be improved yet. It's a bit sort of like, oh, I got to scroll here, I got to move there. Sometimes I got to drag the screen, sometimes I got to use my scroll button to. So it's a bit like that. But all in all, I say it's a pretty great step forward to seeing another one of our favorite games on Board Game Arena. I hope they do more. Incoming. Well, this is usually where I'm going to talk about maybe not all the games I got in the past couple of weeks, but a couple. And this week, because I was interviewing Grant Dalglish, I got a couple of Columbia games. That's upside down. Yeah, there we go. Quebec 1759 and Alliance. The Quebec 1759 is it's a beautiful. I don't think they've changed the rules a bit, but it's a 50th anniversary edition. That game came out in 1972, I think. So we're a little past 50 years, but this is a 50th anniversary. So rather than just a cardboard map, it's got a mounted map. There's all new art. The box cover, as you saw, is new and it's great. It's a terrific drawing or painting. The map, same thing. I love the new map, but it doesn't make me feel like they've ruined anything by updating it. It's totally the old map, just kind of refreshed. And then of course the old counters were the old blocks were they were paint on paint. So it was like white text on blue or red, whereas now they're stickers, so they're full color blocks. So that's the interesting thing. Well, Stuka Joe here has a great comment. So the other game is Alliance, and if you haven't heard about it, it's a 1 to 7 player block game on Napoleonic era Grand Strategic, and that's how many directions do the blocks have to face since it's a multiplayer block game? Exactly. If you have more than 4 players, I think it's going to get a little tricky to not let the people sitting beside you see your blocks, even if you're in a big round table. I have a feeling if you get a full 7 players in that game, you're going to need to pop your blocks down because I don't think there's any way to keep them secret with that many people. And I think Grant Dalglish sort of agreed with that. I agree, John. When Grant was talking about it in that interview, he did really sell it. It does sound great. It looks great. Where Columbia is right now with their art and with their just their whole graphics packages, I think they've got a really good artist right now, and everything's kind of running on all cylinders. So that looks great. So that's it. That's it for news. That's it for incoming. So tonight's topic, we're going to talk about World War II tactical games. So I think for most of us, we've all probably played them, but a lot of this discussion tonight, I'm going to kind of frame it around squad leader or advanced squad leader, really. So, that's what I'm going to be looking at, sort of small unit tactics. But anyway, let's get right onto it, and we'll see where the discussion goes. Well, let's go. Maybe that'll be a little bit better. So yeah, this is not exactly what we're going to talk about tonight, but in some ways, I think of Panzer Blitz as the first ever tactical World War II game, a game with geomorphic, non-specific maps, ranged fire, LOS, all the things we kind of think about. No opportunity fire, of course, that came along a little bit later when they did Panzer Leader. And in this game, infantry is companies and vehicles platoons, I think, maybe. So it's a bit bigger scale than what I really want to talk about tonight, but I just wanted to mention it because it sort of kicks off everything that we're going to talk about tonight. The next game I want to just mention briefly is Tobruk, because this is the first war game I ever bought, so this was an attempt in some ways to add realism. I put that in giant quotation marks because I don't really know what people mean when they say, everybody's got a different idea of what they mean when they say realistic. Certainly there was a lot more in this game. It's just single tanks. I think the infantry is still platoons or something like that, but it's tons of dice rolling. You got to roll 2 hit. If you hit, you roll to see where you hit. Once you find out where you hit, you roll to see if you penetrate, and then once you are sure that you penetrated, then you find out what was the effect. So tons of dice rolling, and it felt very mechanical. Yeah, I totally agree with Joshua. Very, very good it was very good for my math brain as well. But I think things just took a giant step forward when we finally got to squad leader in 1977. This is kind of the godfather of all our squad level games. This came out, and we just we never looked back. It had this initial game that had the 3 nationalities, and then 3 successive expansions that added more and more, and kind of changed more and more till by the time you got to the 3rd one, it was a bit of a mess. And so they decided to redo the whole thing, and we get to the point where we're at ASL, the real sort of godfather and champion of World War II tactical games. I think this is a game that there's not many people who don't have an opinion about it. I think sometimes when you're talking to people about this game, it feels like it might be equally loved and hated, but you certainly can't deny that it's hugely popular. There's many convention events or conventions themselves that are ASL only. There's not many games that have that kind of a dedicated following. Anyway, let's just look at ASL for just a minute before we start talking about all the other games we're going to talk about tonight. I have about, I don't know, a dozen that I'd like to hit. But when we talk about ASL, I think probably the first thing we think about is cost. I mean, this is just a picture of of my shelf of just most of the core modules. There's also all the historical modules. There's the journals, the scenario packs, and then all the third-party stuff. Sort of for the first 15 years of ASL, it felt totally possible to keep up with it, to buy everything, including the third-party stuff. When it was still with Avalon Hill, the guys from MMP, they were originally a third-party producer. They had they had their own little magazine called Backblast, and they put out their own scenario packs and whatnot. But as it's grown up now, I think it's completely impossible to have everything. I mean, there's just so much. There's new ASL stuff coming out all the time, and not just from the US. There's great ASL stuff coming from France for sure, with the Franck Trier and other producers. I think there's some coming out of Italy as well. We are inundated with ASL, and yeah, I agree with. I think Joe hits it on the head here. I certainly know a lot of guys in my local ASL club. I founded an ASL club here back in, I don't know, 95 or so, and then I handed over the reins in about 2000. But I still go back and see those guys and play when, if I get a chance. And I would say probably most of those guys, ASL is all they play. It is, for a lot of guys, it's a lifestyle game, and it's the only thing they play. So that was part of why I got out of it for a while. I quit playing ASL for about 15 years, and then I don't know, it's just like heroin. And I saw it, and I rebought it all again, and I did it again. So that's I think it had a hold on me somehow that I just couldn't shake. In any case, let's talk about what makes ASL. We have the basic stuff. We have squads, we have leaders, we have non-specific geomorphic map boards, and we have ranged fire with LOS. That's kind of the that's sort of the guts of what ASL is, I think. If you really boil it down, that, and it's got a great sequence of play that it broke away in many ways from the I Go You Go of a lot of the Avalon Hill games that we were playing at the time. If you look at the units here, we see the leaders, and this thing, leaders with the ability to improve when they're directing fire, to increase a squad's movement, rally broken units, things like that. I think in later years, some folks derided that as unrealistic and started to complain that leaders in ASL were just added improperly, and that's not the way it worked, and that there were many more or many less, or whatever the argument was. I don't know. I always felt that the leaders in ASL just represented a few important individuals, that not that they were trying to represent every NCO and officer that was present in the engagement. Anyway, whether you liked the leaders or not, there they were, and I think that they're part of what gives ASL its ASL-ness. The thing that draws people back to ASL is the way that it creates narratives, and it's often sort of like movie narratives. I think Heroes of Normandy, we think of that as sort of like a cartoon movie-like narrative, and it is, but I still think ASL sort of has that feeling of a great story unwinding. And then of course we see the infantry units here, and that's I guess we see a German engineer squad there, and there was a handful of different unit types in the basic box. The first one that was just Germans and Russians, but as you bought more core modules, as more modules came out, there was tons more nationalities, tons more unit types. ASL certainly feels like they're trying to shoehorn everything into it in some ways. Maybe sometimes they go a little overboard. I'd certainly say that in Twilight of the Reich, the most recent thing that they're calling a core module. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Another thing we think about when we think about ASL, of course, is the charts. The upper chart there is the infantry fire table, where you basically you count up how much firepower you have, roll 2 dice, and it'll give you a result anywhere from no effect to a KIA with things in reduced, or things in between, such as morale checks or casualty reductions, where you change from a squad to a half squad, things like that. And then below that, we see the terrain effects chart, and I think this gives us maybe a sort of a first glimpse of what some people complain about. That for a terrain effects chart, that looks awfully complex. I know. It's mostly just how many movement points to enter various terrain types, but I get that it looks daunting. And yep, we'll definitely talk about Lock and Load Tactical down the road. We'll get to it tonight. Don't you worry, boys. Anyway, over the years, ASL added all the major nationalities, theaters. There's everything from Allied and Axis miners, jungle, desert, everything. And with all the third-party stuff, there's literally thousands of scenarios. Nobody could ever play everything. So that said, I'd say ASL still gives us the bones of what becomes what we usually think of when we're looking at tactical squad level games. We have leaders and squads. We have geomorphic or non-historically specific maps that seems to run through most of these games. Ranged fire, of course, at this level, and line of sight rules. Morale rules. This is something that most of the games have in common. And then, of course, defensive fire versus moving units, opportunity fire, burst fire, whatever you want to call it. That becomes a very important feature of all these games. I have to say, though, there's actually the first one that's not ASL that I want to talk about tonight is actually came out in between SL and ASL. This is Up Front came out in '83. The Squad Leader was in '77, and then the expansions. This came out in '83, and ASL didn't come out until 1985. Up Front is maybe my favorite all-time game. It's hard to pick an all-time favorite game, but I just love this game. And of course, we're just going to talk about it a little bit because this game is not doesn't exactly fit the scale we're talking about tonight either. Here we have the units are individual men, not squads. So I don't know. When this game came out, it was billed as the Squad Leader card game, which I'm sure that wasn't Courtney Allen, the designer's idea. I'm sure that was just a marketing idea from Tom Shaw or Don Greenwood or someone else up above, because there's not a lot about Up Front that actually reminds me of Squad Leader. There's, like I said, the units are individual men, not squads. And if you take a look at these cards, you see that one of the wonderful things about what Courtney Allen has done here is he's made a giant step forward in terms of user interface or user experience, in that you have the cards out in front of you. You build your squad is in front of you, your opponent's squad is in front of them, and so much of the information you need is right on those cards. So there's no in Up Front, there's a rule book, there's the cards, there's these cards, and then there's the cards that drive the action, of course. But there's no need for player aids and things like that. As I mentioned, I think I mentioned, there's no board. There's just cards. There's those were little perforated cardboard cards, but these are more like a regular deck of 3 or 4 decks of bridge cards. If you haven't seen ASL before or Up Front before, these are what the cards look like. And so there's no map board. The terrain comes from the cards. You can play terrain on yourself or on your opponent, and that's basically you build, in a way, you build the board as you go. As you move forward, you move out of the terrain you're currently in, and then you can play some terrain for what you move into. But of course, while you're moving from one to another, you put yourself at risk for more harsh fire from your opponent. Without a board, the only thing that you really have to consider is the range between your unit and your opponent's unit. this is a concept they call relative range, and of course you know that shortens up as you approach one another. It's a concept that a lot of new players stumble over, it seems, but I don't know. It seems very, very clear to me that it's just a bit of math. It's you take the range, you minus them from subtract one from the other, and you end up with how far apart you are from each other. That's basically it. It's not hard math. These cards control all the action. You see, there's a fire card there. There's a movement card. There's a rally card. The minefield card that doesn't get used very often, but it's we'll talk about Combat Commander later. A lot of people get frustrated in that game when they can't fire because they don't have the right card in their hand, and that all started with up front. If you don't have a fire card, or if the only fire cards you have in your hand are too high power and you don't have enough firepower at the range you are from your opponent, because of course the closer you get, the more your firepower increases, and the bigger the fire cards are that you can use. So yeah, you have those same sorts of feeling like I can't do what I want to do. But I think that's part of what makes the game great, right? Is you've got to play the cards you have, not the cards that you wish you had, and you know, like they say, great plans fall apart in the face of the enemy. So yeah, that's I guess the only other things to say about Upfront is where one way that it was like Squad Leader is that different nationalities have different unit strengths. They have different hand sizes, different discard capabilities. So there was a little bit of that was similar to SL. Another thing that was similar to Squad Leader that I don't think is part of ASL, no, I'm sure it's not, but in both the original Squad Leader and Upfront, there's an included rule section at the back for sort of an ongoing campaign where you get what are called elan points that can be spent in between playing scenarios to increase the ratings of some of your men, but also any of your guys that are KIA or whatever, they're not going to be available to be used in the next scenario. So if you wanted to, you could put together a campaign and track your guys the same way you would in. I find it really similar to a lot of solo games. You know, like the way you have your in B-17 Queen of the Skies, for example, you have your whole crew for your B-17 bomber. I always thought that the little campaign system in Upfront was much like that, where you kind of start to feel attached to the guys in your squad. Anyway, on to a game that and these aren't going to these aren't going to be in strictly chronological order here. These are just going to be a bunch of games that I have or that I've played and that are in basically the right scale. And so let's talk about this one. This is Panzer is it's now published by GMT, but when it originally came out, it was by Yaquinto, and I don't know if it had that same title or not. I can't remember, but there was that, an 88, and another one, and I love the Yaquinto. It's something about the Yaquinto covers had Roger McGowan, great Roger McGowan covers, so they drew me in right away. But I can't say that I'm a giant fan of Panzer. I'm not sure. I'm not sure why. I bounce off it a little bit. I keep coming back to it and trying it out again. Like Tobruk, this is a game that's more focused on armor than infantry. There's a counter at the top, and there's a unit data card, and sort of in a way the opposite to Upfront, where you have to have these data cards to play the game. I think Tobruk is actually quite like that as well. All the information is not on the counters. Maybe it's just me. Yeah. Yes, Josh, you're totally right. Armor was the third game. Maybe it's just me. I don't find these attractive counters. The illustration of the AFV is great, but there's just something about where it says 4T 5-8. I know what all that stuff means, but it's just like, I don't know. It looks like I don't know. It does not look good to me. So just call me cranky about that one. It's subjective, of course. But you can see the data table there. It's kind of cool to have a card for all the different unit types you have. You don't need a card for every piece you have, just a card for every type. So if you only have IS-2s and T-34s, you only need 2 cards. This is a game where I wonder if can we see that? Yeah, it's the AFVs face hex sides rather than hex spines, and I was just going to say this exactly, Joe. I prefer them pointing to the corner. With Panzer, they point to the hex side, so it's a different. I don't know. It's I have to get past my aesthetic quibbles before I can start to really enjoy this game. Yeah, I agree. I agree, Josh. Too much dead space on the counters, which is funny because in general, I kind of like a lot of. I don't mind some dead space. I hate a counter that's too cluttered, mostly I hate a counter that's too colorful. That's what I find. It's not cluttered. It's if it's got too many counters, I can't figure out what's going on. But yeah, these counters do feel like they've got a bit of dead space on them. I don't know. I've played the game a few times. It feels a bit flat to me. I've never liked the spotting rules. They trip me up a bit. Maybe I just need to play with someone who really loves the game and they'll turn me on to it. In general, I don't care for. I like the way ASL does it, where everybody's assumed to be spotted unless they're concealed or hidden. Whereas games like this, and later we'll get to lock and load tactical, where no, you're assumed to be not spotted. So we're marking the people that can be seen rather than marking the people that are concealed. I don't know. Maybe it becomes about which one I learned first. Maybe it's as simple as that, but who knows? Then we come to this Combat Commander. So in some ways, this is taking Upfront to another space, but it's not really. It is definitely a card-driven game. It's all about the cards. But it still has map boards and counters. So it's so it's kind of between your typical ASL style tactical game and Upfront. It's kind of got the best of both. I totally dig the card system in Combat Commander. I've definitely got friends who really chafe at the idea of not being able to fire at somebody right in front of you. You want to take that opportunity fire shot, but you don't have a card, and you feel that's unrealistic. But I can come up with all kinds of reasons in my head why maybe there was a shot to be had and this squad couldn't take it. Maybe they didn't actually see it. Maybe they're reloading. Maybe who knows? You can tell yourself a story to make it all make sense. Yeah, it is a hand management game. That's definitely it. But I think in terms of all the games we're going to talk about tonight, I think Combat Commander makes the greatest narratives next to ASL. There's something about this game that when you're talking about it afterwards, you're talking about it like you've just seen a movie or something. It's yeah, and then when this happened, and then oh my god, and then you did that, and I did, and you know, it's one of those games. I guess, do I have one more? Yeah, there we go. Should just have a quick look at the cards. Yeah, so it is a hex and counter game, but the cards definitely drive the game. And then you know, of course, this means that Chad Jensen, the late great Chad Jensen, got to do something else that was quite squad leader like, in that he got to differentiate the decks and make a different deck for each nationality, different rules, subtle rules to go with each deck, like the number of cards that you can discard in a turn, things like that, the number of actions you can play per turn. So he got to do that same thing that SL and Upfront did, where you get a lot of the chrome is in the difference between the different nationalities. Yeah. Yes, Chris, Chris de Klerk, we're definitely going to talk. We'll definitely talk about lock and load tactical in a bit here, and fighting formations, David. I've got that on the list here as well. So I bet I'm going to have most of what everybody's interested in, I think. But if we get to the end and there's something we haven't talked about, well, we'll just talk about it. Here now, this is an interesting game. I've only got the Guadal. I don't have this one. This is Awakening the Bear, but I've just got the Guadalcanal game, and I've played Awakening the Bear. They've got a computer version. I played the computer version of that. But as I understand it, these games, as they've gone through different printings or editions, quite a few things change from edition to edition. Even like I think Awakening the Bear, the second edition is quite different from the first edition. But I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you how. There we have a look at. It's the standard tactical stuff. You've got the geomorphic boards. You've got unit counters for squads and AFVs, and it looks quite squad leader like, really. I think what's interesting here is there's an activation system that where you roll off to see who goes first. When it's your turn, you pick a unit, and it starts off with 7 action points. You do 1 action with that unit, and the actions, different actions cost different things. Like moving a hex might cost 1 point, or firing might cost 3 points. Whatever, you do a single action, and you have a little slider of the 7 points. You subtract the 7, then your opponent activates a unit. They do an action, reduces it, goes back and forth. As soon as your unit is out of action points, you activate another one. So you're not going to be in sync with your opponent that way. But that's the way it's. Instead of like, it's even more interlaced than Squad Leader or Advanced Squad Leader for sure. This game is back and forth in terms of counter for counter. I think it's kind of a cool system. It's interesting to see the way it works. But it makes me, I haven't played enough to know this, but it really makes me think that it probably works best when the two sides kind of have a similar amount of units, because it would feel quite weird if I had 20 squads and you had 4 and an AFV. It'd feel like you would run out of units to activate quite quickly. I don't know. I haven't played enough to know how that impacts, or maybe just all the scenarios are roughly the same amount of counters. I don't know. Combat here in Conflict of Heroes is quite different as well. Every counter has an attack value. You would add your attack value to a 2d6 roll, and the defender adds their defense rating to their whatever the terrain effects modifier is. Every terrain gives you more or less protection. So the attacker comes up with an attack value. The defender ends up with a defense rating. And if the attack value is higher than the defender takes a hit. And then it gets even more interesting, because if you take a hit, you draw a random hit marker from a cup that only you see. It goes face down underneath the affected unit, and then your opponent, who scored the hit on you, he doesn't know exactly what happened. And those hits can range anything from no effect to KIA, with a bunch of ones in the middle that just reduce different ratings on your counters. So you never have to reveal what those rating reductions are until you actually use one of them. And then the kicker is that any unit that gets hit a second time, no matter what the hit is, they're KIA. So yeah, I think Conflict of Heroes is it's got some interesting stuff going for it. It's one that I think I feel like I want to play some more, because I don't know, I don't hear it talked about a lot right now. It doesn't seem to be anybody's. Nobody's talking about it like it's their favorite tactical system. But I think I don't know. Like, I've described the things I like about it, but maybe if I get in there and play it some more, maybe I'll find some things that I don't like about it. Here's one that's basically on my sell pile, but I thought I'd throw it in. Does anybody play this? This is it's a tactical game. It's got geomorphic boards and lots of the familiar things, but it this will tell you everything you need to know about it right here. It tries to merge the idea. It uses minis instead of counters. If you look closely at the top picture there, you'll see really big boxes too. They call them coffin boxes. Those infantrymen, there's 3 or 4 on that stand, and as you take hits, you pull one off, and until you get to none, I think. I don't know. I'm not a big minis guy. It's not my. I find them more fiddly than anything, and the other thing about minis, there's literally no information on your counter there at all. At the back of it, or no, you can see sort of one of those is side on. You can see on that infantry stand there that there's a little thing on the edge, because if you get broken or pinned or whatever, a little counter slides in sideways there. It's I don't know. I find it a really kind of ugly, unattractive system. That's what I'll say. It's cumbersome. I sort of pimped mine totally out so that you're supposed to pop the little nibs in the bottom thing, but they can fall off. What I did is I put a magnet underneath the bottom of each of those stands and a little tiny washer on the bottom of each of those men, and then they just they magnetize on, and I found that works better. But I did all that, and then I hardly played the game. I kept it around because I got it when my son was very young, and I thought maybe the minis would attract him enough to make him want to play it. But I think I might have tried to introduce it to him when he was too young, and he found it a bit overwhelming. I don't know. Maybe it's still on my shelf. I'm not going to send this off into mass trade or anything, because it's just, the box is too heavy. And when you add in all those washers and whatnot as well, it's even heavier. So if I'm ever going to sell this thing, I'm just going to sell it locally so that it doesn't have to go in the mail. Tide of Iron, definitely. Yeah, that's exactly right. That's totally right, Joe. The more you pop them off, the more they deteriorate. That's why I changed mine into that system of having of making them magnetized, because it just seemed like, if this at that point I thought I was going to like the game, and I wanted to preserve it, and I could see that the holes were going to get too big, or the thing you stick in the hole was going to shear off, and it was just like terrible. Didn't like it. Welcome. Good to see you, Herb. I think I might have met you on BGG years ago. We might have tried playing some Band of Brothers together. That might have been you. I'm not sure. Anyway, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you like the videos. So I don't think I have anything else to say about Tide of Iron. I just popped it in there because I wanted to slag it. I suppose maybe that was the reason. Well, before I'll just pop this up. I'm not going to talk about Memoir 44 tonight. I didn't. It is tactical. I don't. There's something about I love all the Commands and Colors games. Memoir 44 is, it's part of that system. It's just not with that publisher. I love those games. But the Memoir 44 is one that I find a little weird, because the thing about all those games is it's sort of a sliding scale. Sometimes a block means this many men, sometimes a block means that many. So it just didn't feel like it was going to fit in tonight's discussion. But yeah, here we go. This is now this is a lot of folks' favorite. I think this is the latest iteration of Lock and Load Tactical Heroes of the Bitter Harvest. This is a long-running series. If you look at their webpage, there's got to be like 12 or 15 Lock and Load Tactical different games out there. But this runs right up the center of the line, in that this is World War II. They've got some Vietnam. They've got little bits here and there, all kinds of stuff. Like I said, this has been around for quite a while. They're so confident now in the system and in the rule book. I think this is rule book 5.1 or 5.2, something like that. Anyway, when their production values are fantastic, and when you get these, when you get a box of this, it's a spiral bound rule book and a spiral bound scenario book. So they're saying, look, there might be a little bit of errata that you have to write in, maybe, but you're not going to be printing out a living rules book. That's the message they send to me when they put the rules in a spiral bound book like this, which I totally appreciate. Spiral bound books are fantastic, and they sit flat. My only complaint about their rule books is they're not printed on white or off-white paper. A lot of the pages are darker or what have you, and it's just harder to write stuff on. And I'd rather have just white paper. That could be a lie. I don't have that book in front of me, but that's just the way it feels in my mind. Anyway, the game also has data cards, like we've seen in a couple of the other games, but in this case, this is just extra. Most of the info is on the counters, and this gives you all the same info that's on the counters, but spreads it out and makes it more easy to read. And if you were looking at the counter and you couldn't remember what a certain number meant in a certain place, and you got your data card in front of you, you can just look at the data card and say, oh, that's what that is. You can see, in some ways, it reminds me of some of those other data cards. It's got your standard geomorphic geoboards, and I think I remember now. Each of the boards comes in two sizes, one in a smaller hex size and one in a larger hex size. So if you're playing a smaller scenario and it only needs like one or two boards, you can use the bigger ones and have big hexes if you're one of those people who loves to spread your counters out rather than stack them. I'm a bit OCD. I sort of love stacked counters. It's crazy. Oh, good. That's good to know. Yeah, I know it's crazy, but a lot of people, what they don't like about war games is counter stacking. I don't know. Something about stacks of counters appeals to me. It must be the same reason why I love going to stationary supply stores. I like the orderliness of it all. Anyway, they have these giant boards, which is totally lovely. I will say I find the maps a bit dowdy and dark, not too bad, but a little bit on the darker side. But they're still really they're totally usable. They're totally like, I'm never confused as to what's what on a lock and load board. They do look great. There's other boards that we'll get to that are darker, that cross a line where I go, oh, yeah, this is too dark for me. These look okay. Here's some examples of the units. We've got the pretty standard things, right? We've got leaders, we've got squads, we've got AFVs. This sort of the standard stuff. The blue number in the upper right is the morale, and then the squads, they have like firepower, range, and movement points across the bottom, whereas the leaders have morale, leadership, and movement points down the side. But that's pretty standard stuff. Lock and load tactical. If you, I'm sure there's some people. Well, a lot of people were asking about it tonight, so we'll talk about it a little more in detail. It's a bit like Conflict of Heroes, in that it has back and forth activations. But in Lock and Load Tactical, the activations aren't single units, but you activate a single hex. So if you do have more than one unit in the hex, the stacking, you can't stack a ton in a hex. But if you have more than one in a hex, you get to activate that whatever's in that hex and and it's not that thing of action points where you just go a little bit. You activate a hex, do everything with that. Then I activate a hex and do everything with that. The caveat to that is, if you activate a leader, every leader has a radius, a leadership radius, and when you activate that leader, you can also activate all the hexes within that leader's radius. So you can leaders are super valuable in getting a bunch of things going all at once. Lock and load, it has spotting. Spotting, I don't know. I really don't like it. Like I said, in ASL, I love the idea that everyone's spotted unless they're concealed. The default is spotted. In this game, the default is that you're concealed, even though there's no, like, the counters. You can see what the counter is. In ASL, if you're concealed, there's a little marker on you, and you can't see what was there. It's like, I just find it a much better system. But I'm sure I'm not the only one who's complained about the spotting rules, because in that spiral bound notebook or rule book, when you get to this section on spotting, the very first thing is there's a big designer's note or maybe even a publisher's note saying, look, this is spotting. We know a lot of guys don't like this and have complained about it over the years, but it's core to the system, and we've tried to fix it to make it more intuitive, and it's staying. So get over it. Basically, there's nothing nasty about it, but it's definitely reckoning with the idea that a lot of people have pushed back about the spotting over the years. So they're spotting, whatever. The combat is in some ways. Well, that's good to know, Josh. We'll have to play, and then you can make sure that I understand it. The combat is a little bit like Conflict of Heroes as well, in that you have the attacker's firepower plus just a 1d6 versus the defender's, not a defensive rating, but whatever the defender's terrain modifier is, plus a 1d6. And if the attacker is higher than the defender, then you get some kind of a result. In this case, if the attacker is higher than the defender, everybody in the targeted hex has to make a damage check, and that's a one die roll versus their morale rating. There's some DRMs there, and the results from that can be anything from having the units shaken, broken, sort of, or eliminated, or they might escape it altogether. They can pass it. Leaders can be wounded, heroes can be created, all that kind of good stuff. That's very similar to ASL. I think I definitely think Lock and Load Tactical. I can see why for a lot of people that chafe at ASL. They look at that big rule book and say, no, it's not for me. I can't do that. That's too much. It's too much to learn. It's a this rule book is, I don't know, is 80 pages, maybe not even that. I should have had a look. It's not huge, and it's laid out sensibly. It's a nice rule book all in all. I will interject here though to say I think ASL gets a bad rep just because of the size of that rule book. And also that rule book, the ASL rule book, is without a doubt written not as a teaching tool, but as a reference. And as a reference, I don't think there's a better rule book in all of wargaming. It's got the finest index in wargaming, and it's the finest reference to my mind. But it's not easy to learn. It's got so much chrome. It's much easier to learn if you have somebody to teach you. If you want to learn ASL, find somebody to teach you. My recommendation is just skip the starter kits altogether, unless you're trying to fight through it on your own. I think learning the real deal is not all that hard. The basic 6 phases or 8 phases of the sequence of play they make sense. It's and they're very straightforward. They're very easy. If you try to learn ASL and have a friend teach you, and you just play with squads, leaders, and a couple of machine guns and the terrain on a board, there's not that's pretty easy to learn. The hardest thing you'll have to learn there is maybe the LOS rules or the routing rules, where to route if you break and you have to route. They're maybe the trickiest, but they're not that tricky. The core system of if you think of ASL, the core system is easy, but there's a monumental amount of possible chrome. You can add almost anything in. You can have caves. You can have dust storms. You can have glider landings. You can have fighter bomber attacks. All kinds of stuff. There's it's all up to you how much you want to how complicated you want to make it, and you can start small and crawl your way up. Yeah, that's there's tons of infantry only scenarios. That's exactly it. I'm glad to see you here, Indy. Indy's my good friend, my ASL buddy, who was part of the ASL club back when I founded it here in Calgary all those years ago, and Indy took it over, and he's been running it for years. So Indy's definitely here as an ASLer who wants to hear a little bit about what the competing games are all about. Anyway, so I think that's all I have to say about Lock and Load Tactical. It's definitely a game I'm going to keep playing more of, because there's been nothing in it so far that's made me go, oh, that's it. I'm not playing this one. It's not. It hasn't given me the Tide of Iron feeling yet. This next one though, this is one. Here we go. This is another one that a couple of people asked tonight. This is an interesting game. It's another Chad Jensen game, the same designer as Combat Commander. Sort of like everything he designs was fantastic. The only thing I didn't like about this game was, you see the subtitle there, Fighting Formations Großdeutschland Infantry Division. So all the scenarios in this first volume are scenarios that involve the Großdeutschland Division. I find that super limiting. I much prefer all the other tactical games where things are just nationality specific rather than division specific. There was an expansion to this with a few more scenarios, and just coming out now on P500. I think it's definitely going to ship this year. Is the next full volume, and they add the U.S. 29th Division is the next volume. So it's another case. we're not looking at all the Americans. We're just looking at scenarios involving the 29th Division. So that's a bit of a bummer. And then the other thing is, despite the fact that this is a really excellent game, it's a bit of an oddball. It hasn't attracted the same, and you'll see. I'll show you why. Well, I'll show you why it's an oddball in a minute. But yeah, Joe, Willie, I think you're not alone. I think you're not alone with that. It's a bit of an oddball, and it hasn't attracted like the same. Well, nothing attracts the same fanaticism as ASL, but nobody's been doing much work in terms of writing third-party scenarios for this, or homemade scenarios that I've run across. Maybe there's some on BGG. Maybe I haven't looked in a while, but I'd like to see some more scenarios beyond just what came in the box. Anyway, let's take a look at what Fighting for Formations is all about, because it is very different. I mean, at first it looks a little bit the same. We've got the geomorphic map boards, kind of familiar counters, except if you look, here's the counters. The AFBs and the guns, anti-tank guns or AA guns or what have you, they're on these longer counters. They're not so big as to take up 2 hexes. They still basically fit in a hex, but it was kind of cool to see this bigger size, and it really makes it easy to distinguish the AFVs, the guns, from the soft targets, basically, or the infantry. As Stupid Joe says, he's not alone there. A lot of people didn't like the fact that we were getting a side-on view. So where the little dot is on the far right of those counters is basically to let you know which way the thing is pointing. It is the same way that the tank is facing or whatever, but it's not as intuitive as a top-down look is. David makes a good point about this game. The original box, the core box, comes with, I don't know, 12 or 16 scenarios, but they're all quite big, meaty scenarios that take a fair few hours to play, and that held it back quite a bit. And they really took note. They took that note, and when they released the expansion, the Kharkov game, it's like another dozen scenarios or something. For the most part, they're all smaller scenarios, shorter scenarios. They heard us when we said these are all too big. So I'm not going to detail how the combat works exactly here, I don't think. But what's really innovative with this game is this thing. This is going to be a little bit hard to explain, but it's the thing that makes the game unique. And once you use it, once you play with it, you'll understand. It's not hard to play with. It's just hard to explain. So if you look across the bottom, there's an initiative track in the bottom. There's a zero in the middle, and then off to the left it goes to the German side. Off to the right is the Russian side, and there's a pawn that goes back and forth on this track. When it's on your side, you have the initiative. Then up the middle, the section that goes from 1 to 10, these represent different actions you can take. And at the beginning of each turn, there's a set of little red cubes, and you roll a 10-sider for each one, and so you get a random dispersion of the cubes on that sort of tower, that ladder. And whoever has the initiative, where the pawn is on their side, they look at all the things on their side, because the two sides aren't symmetrical. The actions that the German take have different costs than the ones that the Russian can take. Anyway, you look at where the red cubes are, You find something you want to do. You pull the cube off and say, I'm going to do this for this many points, and however many points that is, you have to move that pawn across the bottom towards your opponent's side. So that's how the initiative goes back and forth. Because if you pick one of those big ones like 8, 9, or 10, definitely the initiative is going to go way over to the other person's side. And then if they pick a couple of small ones, it might just kind of nibble back a little bit before it gets back to you. So so the choice of what action you take, like more powerful actions cost more in initiative. It's like manipulating this chart is a little game within a game. I totally love it. And I love the randomness of where the pawn or where the little cubes go, because there's 10 that go out in a turn. And if only one, say there's only one that lands on the 9 or whatever I want, or the 7, say, and you get to go before me and you choose 7, that 7 is gone. And whatever the 7 was for me, I'm not going to be able to do that action this turn. So sometimes there'll be like three cubes all on 8, or 3 cubes all on 3, or whatever. Those things happen too. So it's pretty fun. Oh, is that right, David? Maybe I'm misremembering. So if you pay 5 and if you pay for the 5, you can do 5 or less. Well, that makes a lot of sense. You can do you can pick any amount that is under whatever you pay for. That totally makes sense. So that could happen then, that there's no 7s and you end up having to pay an 8 or a 9 just to do your action that's 7. That totally makes sense. Anyway, this is the heart of the game. This is what makes it so much different from any other tactical game I've ever played. Like I said, I'm not going to describe the combat. I should mention one thing about the combat. The combat, it shares a little bit with the one we talked about earlier, in that when you get a hit on a unit, you draw a chit from a cup, and there's a randomization in terms of what different hits could do. And so it's not like you roll a KIA, you get a KIA. It's you roll a hit, you see what you get. And that adds another bit of spice to the game. Totally interesting system. If you haven't jumped on it, I give this one 2 thumbs up. And if you're not interested in the Russians, well, just wait a couple months and buy the American one, because I'm pretty sure it's going to be self-contained. You're not going to need the first volume to play the new one. I'm 99% sure that that's the case. Okay, here's the next one. This is some people's favorite as well. It's not my favorite. I'm trying to like this game, but this is what I'll say about it. Designer Jim Cron apparently was an ASL player, played it for a long time, and then decided that there was some things he didn't like about it, and he decided to make his own tactical game and fix everything that he didn't like. Primary was his idea that units realistically spread out. So you should be spreading your units out rather than stacking them up. I don't know. No one that I know who plays ASL at any level of proficiency stacks their units. I mean, you're putting all your eggs in one basket and you're just asking for it. So I'm not sure who he was playing ASL with all those years that he thought ASL players stacked all their units and we needed a game where you didn't stack. But anyway, that's one of the things he goes on about in his designer notes. And then his other big thing, though, is that ranged fire is generally used just to suppress the enemy, and then you move in and finish the job off in close combat. And that's less controversial. I think we can do that in ASL as well. But in any case, those are a couple of his big things. So the other problem, or the big problem for me, really, other than the thing about that is these go together, I guess, is the rule book. And in the rule book, in some ways, I feel like Jim was, every rule he wrote was him trying to tell you why it was better than ASL, or just saying fuck you ASL. It feels like his whole game is a big finger to ASL, which is like, dude, make your own game if it makes you happy. Maybe we'll like it and we'll play it. But like, you're not scoring any points by putting your finger up to one of the most beloved games in the hobby. So maybe back off that whole tangent for a bit. Anyway, that's not the worst thing about the rule book. The worst thing about the rule book is the way the rules are written. It is garbage. The rule book is written in what we would call in Euro games conversational style. It is definitely a rule book that's there to help you learn the game. As a resource, it is the shits. It's impossible to find anything. It's just terrible as a reference. The exact rule you want is often buried. It's the middle sentence in a paragraph that high. It's just, it's terrible. I couldn't dislike a rule book more than this one. This is my poster boy for how not to write rule books if the rule book needs to be used as a reference while you're playing the game. Awful. When the game came out, he got a lot of feedback along those lines, and there was a lot of talk about after about a year or so that he was going to rewrite the whole rule book, and I don't know that ever happened. I don't think we ever got a new rule book. We did get a couple more expansions that I got, and I bought them because I'm, it's like enough people like this game that I keep going. That I keep going back to it to, try and find something about it I like. But I don't know. I think he finally did one that's got the Russians. Maybe that's just come out, or maybe it's about to come out. No, he did. Maybe it's about to come out. And he's done a Pacific one. I think I have that one, but I haven't even looked at it yet. Life's, I got a lot of tactical games to play. Yeah, I got to get it back in the rotation, I guess. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Herb and I played a couple, and yeah, he says the expansion scenarios were much better than the original ones. I never really got a grasp on how good the scenarios were or not. I was always like trying to learn the system and trying to decide if I liked it or not. This is definitely a game. I guess. Did I jump one here? No. Oh, there we go. Yeah, sorry. There we go. So this is it's your standard geoboard encounters kind of thing. But here's another thing that I never liked about. Yeah. Oh, here you go. Oh, I think this is another good pal of mine from Calgary, Robert. You are exactly right. This next slide will show us why. Why on earth would you use what it looks like Comic Sans as your typeface on your counters? It's just horrible, and it's all over the point. It's all over the place. I've seen Jim Cron's response to this. His response was he wanted a typeface that mimicked propaganda posters from the 40s. It's like, well, that's a good thing for title cards and headlines, but it's not a great way to convey information. And the counters are like not great in terms of the font, but I can get back past it on the counters. But that same typeface is all over the player action cards as well. He uses it everywhere. It's ugh. That's what it is. It's not my thing. Anyway, I'm not going to give up on it. Yeah. yeah, I didn't. Yeah, we can maybe go back here. You won't see much of it, but yeah, the maps, you can barely see it there, but instead of like a top down, you can see that there's shadows behind the trees, for example. That means that the different boards will have a light source coming from a different direction depending on how you put, like, artistically it makes no bloody sense. It's a terrible idea. I'm sorry if Band of Brothers is your favorite game. I'm sorry for harshing your mellow tonight, but that's I don't know. Like I said, I haven't given up on it. I'm still continuing to keep it in the collection, and I'm going to give it another go. You know, there's going to be somebody who suggests it to me, and I'm going to go, okay, I have to play it. You've asked. I better do it. So anyway, but on to one that's a little more popular, I think. Old School Tactical. For this, I have just got, here's volume 4, which I played recently with David Siskin, who's here tonight. I've just got volume 1 and volume 4 of this. This is interesting. I think that this was definitely an attempt to make a simpler tactical game that still has enough bite to it, right? It's yeah, Christopher. I have version 2 of volume 1. That's what it is. Anyway, yeah, I think what they were trying to do here was trying to make it as simple as possible, but still have enough that wargamers felt like they were getting a game. It's so I think that that was a spot in the market that was that they were great to position themselves in. I don't know. I think they might have kicked themselves in the nuts a bit with that, though, because what you can't see is how big this box is. This box is huge and heavy and expensive, and it's hard to, if you want to, I always think if you're trying to say, I've got a simpler game, people want a cheaper game at the same time. So I think maybe going with the giant expensive box is maybe puts a bit too big of a price point for people to consider it as their entry level. Yeah, the rules are pretty simple, but I think they accomplished what they wanted. Yeah, well, you're right, David. Let's go to the next slide. Here we go. Here's the maps. Now, there's a couple of weird things about the maps. One, in each box, as far as I know, it's one map, and it's you can't see, my arms are out big. You can't see them; they're out of the frame. But it's one big map that folds and folds and folds, and each scenario may only use a chunk of that map. Whereas most games would go with say a map like 4 panels that you just place together to make the map. Instead, this is one big fold out. And I've heard some people who love it. They think it's a terrific idea. But I feel every time I'm trying to fold that map out, I think, oh my God, be careful, be careful. This thing's so heavy. Don't rip it along the seams. It always feels like I'm going to tear the map by accidentally unfolding it improperly. And yeah, as Robert says, I think it's a totally mounted map, so it really drives up the cost of the game. Yeah, I'm with you. And then the other thing is, it's double-sided, and you go, oh, good, so there's another map on the other side. But I think the other side is just the same map, but with winter paint job. I think if somebody can, let me know if I've got that wrong. But I think that's right. I think so. It's each box just has one map. And as for as what Chris says here, why not use why only use a whole portion of it? I think in some ways they want to it lets them kind of use it as if it was a bunch of different maps. I don't know. who knows? Because each game that comes with the one map each is going to have a dozen scenarios, and they're going to take place in different parts of the map, or maybe big ones that have the whole map. Who knows? Yeah, that's probably a good way to go with it, Joshua. You definitely you don't have to leave it exposed. That's for sure. Yeah, and Joe is right here. I mean, it was. I feel like it was really Panzerblitz that pioneered this, but SL and ASL really took off with it. And I mean, ASL now is up to their boards, just the normal, the ones you think of, those sort of longish ones. They're up in the 80s now, and then they've got these other ones that are sort of more not squarish, but it's like they're aligned instead of panel long, they're panel wide, and they've probably got about 20 of those as well. So ASL has got a million possible board configurations. It's great. Yeah, well, there's another thing about these big maps from OST. It's too big. It's too big for the table if you don't, unless you have like a big 4x3 table or something like that. It's huge. Anyway, the maps look okay. They're not bad looking maps. They're just big and clunky, and I'm certain they're going to rip. Here's the units, pretty old school. Firepower, range, movement, and there's something there called defense, which I think is a bit like a morale rating, sort of. That's interesting. An expansion pack with small geomorphic maps. Well, that's smart. I haven't come across that. Good to know. I'll look for that next time I'm in my game store. I've played this game a couple of times now. Once with Mr. Siskin, as I said, and this was a totally fun game, fun system, despite a really terrible rule book. It's laid out. The problem with it is the way it's laid out. Say it's an 80-page rule book. I don't know how many pages. Maybe it's 50, whatever it is. There's no sequence of play until you're halfway through the rule book. There's what does a counter mean? What does woods mean versus building? There's all that stuff. There's nothing there's no way to put any of that, unless you played a bunch of tactical games, there's no way to put any of that front information into any sort of context until you get to the sequence of play. And then you go, so that's, now it should just be rulebook writing 101 that it doesn't need a detailed sequence of play, but at least a small attempt at a sketch, a point sketch of what the sequence of play is going to be, needs to be at the front of the rule book, no matter what the game is. We need to know like what we're doing, and then we can read the rules and find out how to do it. That's my point of view. Your mileage may vary, and yes, hats off to Joshua who created an index for the game, because it's, without it, I do not know how you'd find anything in that rule book. It's just bad. Yeah. Well, you're right, Robert. It is a bit simplistic, but maybe we'll have a game. Before you buy it, we'll play it sometime, and you can see if you like it. You're a diehard ASLer, so it may be less crunchy than you like, but I find it really fun. So who knows? Yeah. Well, Stuka Joe's agrees with me 100% here. It's exactly like he says. It gives you an idea of what how all the rest of the rules fit in, where they fit in. It's exactly that. It's a framework. So anyway, old school tactical. Not my favorite, but still something I'll definitely play, and I'm happy to have in my collection. And I'm definitely gonna play it some more. Maybe some more with Mr. Siskin down in Hanford. Who knows? This next one, now this is the latest volume. The the Russian one, the first volume, of course, is American German. Last 100 Yards. Now, this was another real attempt at something new. And what I think, well, it has a bunch of interesting new mechanics, but I think the really interesting thing about it is that they tried to make the time increments smaller in a way. So if you think about a lot of other games where, say, a squad has 4 or 6 movement points, it can zip along. If it's in the open ground, it can go 4 or 6 hexes, say, maybe even farther on a road. In the last 100 yards, if you have the initiative, you have 3 movement points, and costs like 2 to go into a building, 1 in open ground. And if you are not the initiative player and you're reacting to the initiative player, your units have 2 movement points. With this, with the caveat that you can always go at least 1 hex. So you can see right there that we're looking at a smaller time frame, right? It's like we're chopping time up in much tinier increments. We have geo boards, but man, here's like I've played this. Me and some of you might know Pete Wagner, who does a lot of tactical gaming, both air and ground and what have you, and is a great playtester. And anyway, we've played about 10 scenarios of this so far. Yeah, you're right, Joe. It makes it like almost slow motion. It's back and forth. But these boards, not my favorite at all. I'll tell you why. Two reasons. Here, have a look at that hill. So, the contour lines let you know that it's a hill. So there's no different colors for hills. It's all the contour lines. But there's 2 thicknesses of contour lines. And so the thicker thickness indicates another, good to see you, Hexy. The thicker line indicates another full level, but those intermediate lines also have a small effect. If you're not on the same level, it's a really fiddly bit of LOS that where I don't think the juice is worth the squeeze. So I don't like the way they do hills. And then look at the bottom of the map. You'll see a bunch of woods hexes. We're used to woods hexes. That's great. But look at the top. You see a few hexes that have just a little bit of clumps of woods, trees, something. What do you think that is? You think it's something because it is something, but it's not. It's nothing. It's artistic. It's trying to make it feel more like reality. My bugaboo. It's not. I'm great. I'm very good. We've had a good discussion tonight. A lot of fans of tactical games here. Anyway, this I don't know why people don't have. I get on my high horse tonight, so because I'm really invested in tactical games. Maps, number 1, have to be function over form. Have to be. They're the thing we spend all our time looking at. We look at the map more than we look at counters, more than we look at anything else. So if you decide that you want to make it look better, whatever that means, and put a bunch of garbage crap on that doesn't have an actual effect, you're making it worse, not better. Every time I play this game, when I haven't played it for a while, I'm like, oh, what is that brush? Is that, oh no, that's just art. That's nothing. Drives me drives me crazy. Anyway, I'm starting to sound like an old man ranting at trees, so I'll shut up about how much I dislike these maps. But I do like the game. So the map hasn't held me back. Here's the units. Now, this game has very different combat system, and so these numbers are very, very different than what we've seen. The bottom left is the firepower, and then that little number is the range, which is kind of it's used in a very odd way. Over to the bottom right is the morale. That's kind of the same as we see in a lot of games. And then in the upper left, those are close combat values, basically. And if there's a number and a color in the center of the bottom, that tells you what platoon that unit is part of. I'll take a time out to say this. Yes. Yeah, I would love it if Mark Simonich would do tactical maps, because he's the master of form and function. Absolutely. Anyway, these the way the combat works, I don't know if I can explain it all, but it's that range beside the firepower doesn't only tell you what your range is, but it tells you what column you're going to look at for how many small action dice roll modifier points you're going to put out, and you're going to start with, like in the case of that machine gun crew, they're going to start with a modifier of +1, whereas that little half squad beside it is going to start with a modifier of 0. And depending on, there's a dice roll modifiers for terrain effects, for the actual range, stuff like that. And then you end up putting on one of those red counters. Those are the negative ones, or there's also green ones when the numbers are positive. The game, one player has the initiative. He moves all of what he activates a platoon, moves everybody in that platoon. Then the non-reaction player gets to anybody who has an LOS. He can activate and react. Less movement, but can still fire, can still place these dice roll, these small arms dice roll modifier chits, and so that's basically how opportunity fire happens in this game. The game's cut up so much that it's impossible to run across. Oh, not impossible, but almost impossible to do the Panzer Bush thing. It's just it doesn't quite work like that. Anyway, once the reactions are done, then the initiative player activates another platoon, calls for reactions, goes back and forth until only the initiative player gets to activate all their platoons. The non-initiative player only gets to react with their units. At the end of once everybody's moved, then we resolve all of these small arms dice roll modifier things, and those units they may get through unscathed. They may become disrupted, which is a bit like being broken. They may become reduced, step reduced. Maybe they'll go from a squad to a half squad, things like that, or half squad to eliminated. At the end of the turn, there's a roll to see how much time has passed, which is interesting. There's a time clock, and how much time. The way the scenario ends is a function of how much time has passed. So that time roll is important. And then at the start of the next turn, you roll again to see who gets the initiative. So the initiative can go back and forth. If one side's definitely the attacker, they may get a little die roll modifier to their initiative range or initiative roll, but it does go back and forth. I don't know. It's funny. I've played probably a dozen scenarios at least now, and I'm still not clear on how much I like it. I know it's yeah, I know another shelf of games, right? I get you. I don't know. I keep playing it. Like I've got a game going right now. We've started in on that. We didn't play any of the Pacific one, but we skipped over to the Russian one, and we're on a second or third scenario of the Russian game. And I don't know. It has the same thought that Band of Brothers has, in that the title of this series, Last 100 Yards, it basically means the same thing. You need to suppress your opponent to make it possible for you to cover that last 100 yards and engage them in assault. What we call this game's word for close combat or melee. But that's a big part of this game. The melee chart is probably even more detailed than the small arms firing chart. Anyway, yeah, this is I'm not going to tell anybody to run out and buy this one. I'm interested in it. I keep playing it, like I said, but yeah, that's kind of crazy. I wonder. 2 killer stacks. Stupid Joe says that he saw the final game of a tournament where it was just 2 killer stacks going at each other, which is, yeah, nobody wants to see a game like that. And that sounds like neither side was actually trying to close with the other side either. It sounds like it would have been a lot of time spent getting no effect and stuff like that. Well, anyway, yeah, the jury's out a little bit on this one, despite how many times I've played it. I've got a lot of games that I love a lot more, but I've played a lot less, which is I don't know how that happens. Here's oh yeah, there's one more slide, I guess. That just shows those are the assault markers. No, nothing special about that. Here's the next game though. Point Blank B is for Victory. So this is an interesting game because it's from Lock and Load again, and it's another card game, and it's like a cross between Upfront and Lock and Load Tactical, in that it has cards for sure, but it has, instead of those little small cards that Upfront has for each man. Point Blank has counters, but it's and it uses cards much like Upfront, but it has this. You see, it has this blank game board. You wouldn't have to use this, but because this is just shows you where to put everything. Because just like Upfront, your terrain comes in the form of cards. Only one of these is actually terrain. It's the stream, but your woods, your buildings, whatever, all that stuff is going to be. Oh, this is that's good to know. Yeah, woods, walls, all that kind of stuff. It comes on a card, and it's going to get laid out on that big grid that I showed you earlier. It's yeah, so terrain is the cards, but there is a board, and there are counters that you put counters on those cards. But it is, as you can see, it is a card game. There's a giant whack of cards. It's a little bit unlike Upfront in that the cards aren't exactly. Each nationality gets their own deck of cards. So there's that. Whereas in Upfront, you have your own little units, not cards, not cards, the tiny cards. But then the action deck is shared. This is not that. This is like each side gets a deck of cards that has all their different units and whatnot on it. Here's an example of a card, and you can see like the big numbers down at the bottom on the right. They're kind of standard. You got morale, range, and firepower. So we kind of know how those things work in most games. but all those little icons across the top, each one of those represents sort of a special ability of some sort. Now, this is an airborne squad, so it's gonna they obviously have a lot of special abilities. Yeah, I'm with you, David. I like the art here too, but I'll tell you, let's go. What I don't like about the art. Let's just go back to here. It's all really dark. Like once you get all the terrain out on the board, it's really dark. This game, like they've really gone for a gritty feel. They want it to be gritty, dirty, but yeah, in comparison, like ASL boards look like totally bright. And I think, as I've expressed earlier, I like to be able to see what's going on. And I don't know, maybe I'm just getting too old, but dark things are not my favorite. These cards aren't dark. These cards are nice and bright and great. The AFV cards, similar, except across the bottom there you have some 2-hit numbers or 2-hit and penetration at different ranges across the bottom, and you can see some in those shields is obviously their armor values, but same sort of thing with that's the machine small arms fire across the in the blue and the red there, and then there's the special abilities with the little icons at the top. Yeah, it is like that. That's a pretty good looking card, no doubt about it. With this art, even a Panzer IV can look great. This is well, that's interesting because the art and symbology, I think, is you have to get to know it, but it's one of the things I like because once you get a handle on it, everything you need, at least in terms of the symbology, is right on the card. And all of those cards let you do different things. But also, like I said, this is a card game. It plays a bit like up front. You have a hand of cards. Train cards come from your hand. You need cards with fire icon. Like some of these icons are going to be fire. So you need fire icons in order to fire. There's a rally icon, like all that kind of stuff. The combat system is not surprising. It's quite similar in some ways to Lock and Load Tactical, including the spotting stuff. You need to do spotting. So I don't dig that at all. Yeah, well, that. I know when I had Sean Druliger, the designer, on my podcast, and I think we did it on YouTube as well. We did a teach and play of this, and he'd said that if you want, you don't actually have to use the mat. You can just lay the cards out in a grid as you go. It's like the mat's just a bit of a bonus there, really. Anyway, I think that's about all I have to say about this, but it's yeah, I think this is a worthwhile game to keep investigating. We'll see for me whether the spotting rules break my back on it or not, because that's I don't know. I'm going to have to get to like the spotting rules. We're quite late, so I've just got one more, and we won't have too much to say about this. This is a brand new game of Spain from Trafalgar Editions, Tactical Commander, and this is it's a bit hard to see in this picture, but I'll tell you what's going on here. This is a card-based game. The big thing you see closest to us is a mat where if we're sitting on this side of the table, this is where we put our cards out. Way on the far side, you can see it's sort of brownish red, is the other person's mat. So very big, where your opponent puts their cards out. That little thing in the middle is the actual mat board. It's a generic hex mat board, and for terrain, there's counters. So you can make any kind of terrain you want. You can make hills, you can make tree. Like it's not like our geomorphic boards, but it's completely non-specific, and it's a bit like if you've played Commands and Colors games where they have those tiles that replace tiles. It's exactly like that, except on little 1/2 inch or 5/8 inch size hexes. It's I've only played this solo. I've played it a few times. I've had a few back and forths with the designer for things I wasn't clear on. You have unit cards, and they go out on that card display in front of you. But each of these cards then has a counter that is associated with it that actually goes on the map. So it's kind of, you've got the things in two different ways. It's a strange game. I think there's much more to the cards. Like the combat is really deterministic and brutal. I don't think there's actually any die rolling for it. I think it's like it is deterministic, except if you fire on me, I may have a card that's like a -3 to your attack, and so it's not totally deterministic in that way. Herb, I have not played Valor and Victory. I didn't want to shell out the money for it, but it was a print and play. But I just didn't feel like I had the jam to do the whole print and play thing. But I think he's now made a version of it that's available on Steam, so I'm going to check it out that way. So we'll see. Anyway, with Tactical Commander, yeah, I'm not sure. This is a game that's going in a whole new direction too, which is always something I like. But it's strange in a few ways. Like on top of the new stuff, it only comes with 2-3 scenarios, something like that. The heart of scenarios in this game is it has a scenario generator, or a system to make your own. So this game, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, we're going to say we each have 200 points, and we make our own decks. We choose, like, all those unit cards have different values, and we each make a deck, and we don't know what we're going to get. We don't know when we're going to get, because it's all random when they come out, but it's going to be like that. So there's not a ton of appeal for you if what you're interested in is recreating a specific engagement, unless you want to totally draw up your own scenario. I don't know. I haven't talked to the designer and asked him about whether they've got more scenarios on the horizon. I don't know. That's true. And if you bought the Kickstarter or the original game, one of the scenarios it came with was a scenario taking place in the Spanish Civil War, and there's an extra little deck of cards just for that little just for if you're going to play Spanish Civil War scenarios. Absolutely. So that's all the games I have to talk about. That's interesting. Now, Stuka Joe mentions the War Storm series, which is units or platoons, company commanders, AFVs. Now that one covers the Spanish Civil War. That's funny, because so does this one I was talking about. It has a little Spanish Civil War. I think it's Spanish Civil War. There's definitely Spanish units there. Maybe it's Spanish units fighting on the Eastern Front. That could be what it is. Hard to know. Anyway, I haven't seen the Warstorm series. That's interesting. It's always good for me to find out of another one that I have to check out. Yes, there is. I don't know if it's a Minden Games. There is another game. I can't remember the name of it. Well, it's funny. There's two games. There's two games that use ASL components. One that just does, and it's a. So basically, what you're buying is kind of a rule book. You need to have ASL to have all the counters and whatnot. That's one, and I don't know if it's Minden Games. It's a very simple looking thing. It's like just got a green cover with black text on it. It's quite simple. The other game though that uses ASL components is way back in the day. Critical Hit, the longtime third-party producer for ASL, way back when third-party producers were first a thing, before, like I said, when Multiman Publishing was just a third-party producer. There was a lot of Avalon Hill, AH, was trying to protect their copyright, and they didn't know what to do with these third-party producers. But all they couldn't copyright their game systems, their mechanics. All they could copyright was the art. So that's why so many of those early third-party scenarios, they tell you what the values, what the counter is, but they draw their own art for it so that they don't get into any kind of copyright abuse. Critical Hit went one step forward in my memory, in that they developed this whole, they were putting out all these games and scenario packs and historical packages, and they developed this game called Advanced Tobruk System, although all the counters looked exactly like ASL counters. And that allowed them to put on all the other third-party product that they were putting out for ASL. They could say, for use with the Advanced Tactical System or other tactical systems. It was just their way of trying to make sure they kept the lawyers from Avalon Hill away from them. I was totally surprised that to see, I've been away from ASL for 15 years. I thought Critical Hit would die. They haven't died. They're still putting out their crappy products. But more surprising is there's some people playing ATS who seem to really like it. I don't get it. It's like, well, whatever. They're a shady company, and not my thing. Not my thing. Well, that's interesting. A couple people giving a shout out to Assault Red Horizon or Assault Italy. Oh, that's those. Yeah, those are those the new ones that just came out? I think I just saw Assault Sicily. I don't even know if it's out or if it's just like the Kickstarter's finishing up, something like that. Yeah, I didn't back it, so I'm going to have to find a copy on my own. Anyway, I think that's all the games that the tactical games in my collection. I didn't talk about Tank Duel tonight because it's just tanks, and I wanted to talk more specifically about infantry stuff. And I didn't talk about Panzer Grenadier because it's more platoon level. So I had to put the fences around the discussion somehow, because it took almost 2 hours to talk about this as it was. But anyway, that's everything I had to talk about. Who's got a system that I didn't say tonight that they really like? Yeah, Josh, I don't know. Like, definitely a Critical Hit. I'm sure they had legal problems, because I'm sure that's what drove them to create a whole nother game just to pretend that they had a whole nother game for all that stuff. I don't know. It's terrible. John, bolt action, is bolt action squads or individual soldiers? Is that like a card game? Or am I mixing it up and it's like an actual minis tactical game? I'm trying to think of what bolt action is. Yeah, right. 28 millimeter minis. Yeah, that's right. That's what I thought. I was at the Sentry Box, my local game store today, and I know I saw bolt action on the shelf, a wall. Actually, they got a wall of that stuff, and yeah, I don't really care for minis, and I'm not trying to change that, because I just feel like I got enough on my plate without the giant wallet swallowing hobby that minis would become. I played some minis way back in the day. There was does anybody remember GHQ micro armor? We used to play this system called Tank Charts, that where the tanks were, I don't know, a centimeter and a half long, it was a cool little system. But you know, I had about 30 tanks, and I just went, if I get into this, I'm just going to be buying and painting and buying and painting and buying and painting. And I couldn't. Yeah, exactly. It's the painting. I like it's not just the fiddliness of the minis themselves, but the thought of painting them or paying to get them painted. I don't know. The other thing is, like, I love all the information that's on a counter and all the information that can be on a mat board. Whereas with miniatures, there's no information on the minis, and I'm sure there's no information on the board either, in a way, in that you know, because the whole thing is about looking kind of realistic, you know, to use that word again. I don't know, it's not really realistic, but whatever. Yeah, well, yeah, good idea. Who knows, maybe we'll talk about, well, I don't know what we're going to talk about in 2 weeks. Maybe I'll have an interview. Who knows? I have to say, this was great fun for me to go through all of these. Yes, exactly. Oh, that's a really good point. If anybody's seen this at a convention, Sam Lemon's Firefight Tactical coming out from GMT, it's kind of like, it's like a upfront deck hybrid game in a way as well, but it's also like buckets of dice placement game. It's I can't describe it, but it's a cool tactical game where the board is a grid, and the train comes out in the like fills out that grid. It's pretty cool. I think people are going to like it. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, they do. Columbia Games does have a World War II tactical block game. If you want to hear a little bit about it, listen to that interview I just did with Grant Dalglish, because he talked about it, and I'd never played it. Well, it wasn't embarrassing, but it was odd. I'm such a big tactical gamer to be interviewing somebody who's got a tactical game in his lineup, and I hadn't played it. I played a bunch of his other games, but I hadn't played that one. And I'm not. I don't know if anybody's played it. I don't. Is each block a man or a squad? Like, what's the scale in combat infantry? I don't know. There's also, I know, Compass has a combat infantry type solo tactical system as well, but I don't do too much with solo games, so I haven't played that one either. But I don't know. I looked at the Columbia one. I was at the store today, and the price tag was a little hefty too. So I was like, well, I'll leave that for another time. Okay, so it's squads for the Columbia game. So I should have had it in the list today. I should have had a look, because it sounds like it would have fit right in what we were talking about. But what can you do? You can't do everything. Well, and I think that's about it for the night, boys or gals, whoever's out there. Thanks for joining. This has been a gas, as I said, and watch this space, or watch my website, or my Blue Sky or Twitter feed or whatever, and I'll have info out on what the next topic will be, and we'll meet up again in another 2 weeks and do this then. All right. Good night, everybody.